These chef trips that we're doing through the Maryland Department of Natural Resources are a way to help the chefs reconnect with the industry. Too many times we have a chef that just gets a fax with a price list on it and he orders the seafood and it shows up in the back door the next day and they have no clue how it got there. These chef trips allow us to actually show the chefs where this product comes from, have that connection, have that imagery in their mind, and help to build the story of the seafood. So it's not just a commodity item, it's an actual labor of love that these watermen bring to the restaurants. So the blue crab that we have here in Maryland, it actually is a species that goes from about Rhode Island all the way down to Venezuela. The furthest north it's currently harvested is about Delaware in a commercial setting. Our crabs are different though than even the Gulf crabs or North Carolina crabs, in that our crabs have to fatten themselves up over the winter to make the hibernation through the winter months. This gives them a sweet flavor, it gives them a buttery flavor that's so much different than a Venezuelan crab, even though it's technically the same species. So when people say Maryland crab meat's the best, there's actually a biological reason for it.
So when oysters, when they breed, which is any time the water hits about 70 degrees, they spend almost all of their calories doing that. By taking away that element, I have the ability to grow them in about a year and a half. And it has this added benefit, because the oysters don't get weakened from reproduction, so far, this type of oyster has proven 100% disease resilient. But you ever heard of that don't eat oysters in the month of R thing? Or with the month of R? Well, that doesn't apply to a triploid oyster. You can eat it all year round, it's the same. If you can, grab like one or two of the little oysters and look how the shell actually grows. One side of it will just shoot out beyond the other one. And that edge, if you feel it, it will be very, very brittle. I mean, you can just round it off. If you let this type of oyster grow, because it's so fast growing, it will grow so funky that it would have to end up being called an ugly oyster. Now, I know you guys probably know that most chefs don't want a funky, ugly oyster all the time. So I do this thing where we take them and just round them over in a tumbling process, or chipping in the industry they call it. And I just try to do it as much as possible. So all of the Barren Island oysters that I send out have been tumbled every 2 months for 18 months.
So why shell is so important is because they naturally like to attach to that shell, and it's a limited resource because there's fewer oysters than there used to be, which is why we created our Shell Recycling Alliance, which works with restaurants to get shell back, because it should be going back to a good cause rather than just taking up space in landfills. A full-grown oyster can filter up to 50 gallons of water in a day. So that's like your bathtub that one oyster can filter in a day. And just so you know, we're just down to 1% of the historic populations of the wild reefs in the bay. So the population of oysters that used to exist could filter the bay's water in like a day or two, that quantity of water. Now the population of oysters would take over a year to filter the water that exists in the bay. So we have a Shell Recycling Alliance and staff members that actually go to these restaurants usually weekly and collect the shell.
So people always talk about sustainable seafood, and that's the buzzword in the industry. Oysters go one step beyond sustainable seafood. They're actually restorative seafood, making the environment that they grow in better. So by eating oysters and featuring them on the menu, we actually encourage oyster farmers to put more in the water. The more we have in the water, the better the bay does. The better the bay does, better for everything. Improves water quality, improves water clarity, which allows seagrasses to grow, which allows the other fish and crabs to hide from predators, and it just makes the bay a better place in general.